They have flown new ones, and they should be up in the next couple weeks, I think, is my understanding. So, this is zoned, all this is zoned light industrial, and we're with the Washougal Crossing portion and phase 2 of it have a mixed-use overlay on it, which allows 50% of the site needs to be preserved for industrial, and the other 50% would allow any use permitted in a light industrial zone. So you'll say, well, that doesn't make sense because there's a bank and there's all these things, restaurants, all those things are permitted in light industrial. So in its essence, even though it's light industrial land, with the mixed use overlay, it's being used as commercial. And to give you a viewpoint of where that starts is, it's west of 6th Street and it's south of the railroad tracks. And if you remember on C Street where the apartment complex is, it's right after that heading west is the rezoned area. Existing uses include the vacant, what used to be West Coast Marine that's now being marketed. And then Mr. Warda's, they look like industrial buildings. They appear that way, but they're mostly being used for offices, and there's a potential retail, but these are type of businesses that require a warehouse to store things or a loading dock. So even though they appear to be industrial, they're really tilt-up buildings that have more of a commercial nature. There's the card lock business where the trucks pull in to fuel up, and actually that is a non-conforming use, but if it was rezoned to highway commercial, it would be conforming. There's also the courthouse and the treasure house and Burger King. So this area is along Highway 14, and therefore I believe it meets the intent and purpose of the highway commercial zoning that we talked about in the very beginning, of being along an arterial, being an intent to serve travelers. And the next one is the Parkersville Park and the port and the parking lot and the ports park. And we're proposing them to be rezoned parks and open space. The next one is Hamilton Lumber. I want to mention that if this one was approved, it would be contingent on the existing use being abandoned. Therefore, the existing use would not become non-conforming. It could be maintained until the property owner chose to cease that use. Again, this is along Highway 14 and meets the definition and the intent of highway commercial.
Before we leave that part,
Yes.
question. How does, for some of those properties, it would be kind of difficult for them to attract business from SR 14 from signs if they're not able to put up signs large enough to be seen from SR 14. Do you have any sort of insight of what you expect for the sign, how the sign code's going to interact?
Wesley Ford is an example. They put a brand new sign up under our existing sign code, and it's very visible from the highway, I think.
Yeah, 'cause, it's been a couple of weeks since I've read the sign code, but I know that there was some, isn't there a restriction for putting up signs that they can't be seen from the highway in a certain zone?
Not that I'm aware of.
I'll have to reread that before.
Yeah. If you find that, let me know, because it wouldn't make any sense.
Just don't need to go back to the slide, but on the one along E Street, when you were into that, if somebody decided to buy two or three of those houses and it was in commercial property, if it's a big enough business, what happens to the location, the homes in the next street back? That does that become a conforming use then when you've identified this piece on E Street?
Well, the properties behind that would not be rezoned. They would retain their zone. And then whenever you have not only conflicting zones next to each other, but even uses that are different. We have what's called buffering standards. We have to build up a berm and you plant trees, and there's those type of things. And the buffer width is different depending on the intensity of the uses. And actually, currently, you have some of that along East Street. If you look at the auto body repair, they back right up to a house with no buffering.
But under the new zoning, Joanne, you wouldn't necessarily be able to buy 3 lots that are contiguous to each other along East Street frontage, and the 3 lots behind that may be G Street frontage, and be able to combine all 6 of those because of the nature of the.
You could combine them, but it would be mixed zones, and you would not be permitted to do anything on the back half, say it was residential, that was not permitted in residential.
So you couldn't build a building big enough back there.
Right.
Put a parking lot back there?
In some residential zones with, like the church did that, the Gateway Church have a parking area in a residential zone. You could, of course, they have buffering.
So, just to be clear, just so I'm assuming that the residential areas along East Street currently would not be impacted by rezoning, it would only be at the time of sale?
That's my understanding from the assessor's office, that it's at time of sale. In fact,
Sale or change of use?
well, Mitch, can you answer that question? He did some research.
Yeah, basically what they look at is what the market's doing, the market sales and the comparables, and so if someone's buying up a bunch of residential, commercially zoned residential property and paying premiums for it, that's gonna affect the other, they're gonna do a comparable and they'll say, well, that's gonna, that's what we've got, the highest, best use for it. But the act of rezoning it is not gonna initially change anything. It's based on what the market's gonna be doing.
But if I go in, assume this rezone goes through, and a year from now, I go in and buy a residence that is standing on East Street,
Yep.
and I intend to use it as a residence, either as my own or a rental or anything else, that use remains with it until
Yep.
that's torn down, or
Absolutely.
that use goes away.
That's permitted
yeah.
use within
Well-
CC.
Yeah, it should be possible to buy a business and turn it into a residence, as long as it meets all the standards for a residence that's zoned commercial or CC, right?
Yes. Well, and this last slide shows you, and the top part is just, it looks blurry to me. It just tells you that we're talking about 87.46 acres total of acreage that would be rezoned, and it tells you the current zone and what is proposed to be rezoned. You'll notice under industrial, I wanted to point out that that proposal is to rezone to highway commercial, and the industrial acreage that would be lost from that rezone can be more than made up with the annexation area that the port's looking at east of the existing industrial park, and the employment center that's in an urban growth area. So there would be no net loss of industrial land, at which purpose is for jobs. And that the comprehensive plan allows rezoning of industrial property with the exception of the port area.
Joanne, the request for annexation for this year closed May 31?
Actually, it's going to be closed May 31, yes. It's supposed to be March, but there's a little glitch on our end, and also a glitch at Columbian's end as far as advertising. And then if you look at the residential, I wanted to assure you that residential properties that are rezoned to commercial really don't impact the existing owner, because not only are existing residential permitted, we also encourage